We're back with another slider update video because, of course, just days after the last set dropped, EA released another title update for FC25 and completely nullified half of the values in that set. And this set's going to be a little different because for the first time ever on the channel, I'm actually going to be recommending ultimate difficulty. I don't know what EA have done with the most recent patch, but they have just killed any dynamism, any intent, any purpose that the CPU plays with on legendary or below. And whilst we've been able to get some of that intensity back through changes to the sliders themselves, I do think ultimate is the best difficulty at this moment in time to ensure that games are as challenging as they need to be. Any viewers of my realistic Borussia Dortmund career mode will know there's been games that I've played recently where it just feels like I can't lose, where the game just feels stacked in my favor. Even when I'm not playing particularly well, I'll just see inexplicable actions from CPU players that either prevent them from scoring or allow me to score. And that's the worst possible feeling, especially if you're trying to keep things as realistic as possible, just feeling like you can't lose. So the primary purpose of the set this time around is to reintroduce some jeopardy back into the game, rediscover that intensity and that purpose from the CPU, so it actually feels like you can concede at any moment, that you could lose any game. And again, that does start with my recommendation of ultimate difficulty. However, if you find ultimate too difficult, of course, these sliders will still be applicable to legendary, to world-class difficulties as well. Now, as usual, the standard set that we'll be going through in detail, first of all, is designed for use with 10-minute halves and is also designed for use with full manual controls. However, there will, of course, be the usual additional sets as well. A harder set for people who need a bit more of a challenge, an assisted set for people who don't want to play with full manual controls, a shorter half set for people who don't want to play with 10-minute halves but prefer something in the 4, 5, 6-minute range, and a shorter halves assisted set for people who want to play with those shorter halves and with the assists on. Now, in terms of the simulation settings, the gameplay sliders, one of the primary goals of the previous set, version 6, was to slow the game down to a more realistic pace. However, we have had to readjust the sprint speed and the acceleration slightly. Overall, the gameplay is a little more fast-paced than I would prefer. However, the danger with lowering acceleration too much is that it causes all kinds of issues with defensive integrity, defensive line integrity, and especially with getting defenders to engage with a ball carrier. You lower the acceleration too much, and defenders simply will not engage. Your attacker will be able to run onto the backline of the CPU team basically unopposed. Also prevents defenders from taking up ideal positions in terms of cutting off lanes for you to either dribble into or pass through. So we've got sprint speed at 38, acceleration at 48 for both the user and the CPU. So no discrepancy between acceleration at this moment in time. This is basically as slow as I can get the game without running into those kinds of issues. Things like pass speed and shot speed, which we'll get to in just a second, also contribute to the overall speed of the game. Shot error, we have increased slightly for the CPU. So we are currently on 45 for the user, 58 for the CPU. Pass error is at 5 for the user and at 45 for the CPU. I believe we've actually lowered the pass error slightly, maybe not from version 6, but certainly from version 5. The error values are actually fairly interesting because most people feel the need to bump these up because either the CPU are scoring too many goals, so people will bump the shot error up, or the CPU is having too much possession, enjoying too much possession over the course of the game. So they'll bump the pass error up. These are not actually the sliders that you want to adjust in those kinds of situations. It can be quite useful to think of these as kind of confidence values. You raise these values too high and it decreases the confidence that the CPU has in the type of shot or the type of pass that it's willing to play. So if you raise the shot error too high, what you end up doing is narrowing the variety of shots that the CPU is willing to take on, and you end up seeing the same goal over and over again, because that's the only type of shot that the CPU is willing to take. So you actually want the error values as low as possible, and it's the shot and pass speed values that are going to have a greater impact in terms of reducing the number of goals per game or reducing the amount of possession the CPU can have, because the CPU is still willing to attempt a variety of shots and a variety of passes, but the success of those shots and passes will be reduced the more that you lower the shot and the pass speed. Just the same quick note that I usually make about pass error as well. Once again, the standard set is designed for use with manual controls. So manual passing, that's why the pass error is so low for the user. In the assisted set, it will be much higher. And in terms of the shot and the pass speeds, we currently have 48 and 32 for the user and the CPU shot speed. And we have 40 pass speed for both the user and the CPU. And again, these combine with the sprint speed, with the acceleration to create the overall pace of the game, which once again is as slow as I can possibly get it without creating unintended and unwanted problems. The injury values just continue to work really well for me, so those remain from the previous version. 88 frequency for the user and the CPU, 35 severity. You see a variety of injuries, including broken toes, but certainly not exclusively broken toes. You see a variety of timelines as well that players will be out for injuries. As for the goalkeeper abilities, we currently have 68 for the user and 32 for the CPU. These values very much pair with the respective shot speeds. And again, this is a much more realistic, much more productive way of increasing or decreasing the number of goals per game, pairing the goalkeeper ability slider with the shot speed slider rather than simply bumping shot error way up. We did have this value at 80 for the user previously, and that was far too high. When you raise this value too much, you start to see some very unrealistic, very inhuman animations from the goalkeepers. So you essentially want these as low as possible, but still have the goalkeeper perform competently, perform functionally. Marking is at 70 for both the user and the CPU. Run frequency is at 65 for the user, 99 for the CPU. These values remain from the previous version, as do all the line values: 80 height, 35 length, and 48 width. These combined with the marking and with the run frequency will give you the overall shape, the overall dynamic of the game. And I don't think we need to make any changes there. I did experiment with slightly lower line height with slightly longer line length. These values just still feel to me the best values that we can settle on. Fullback positioning, I tend to drop 25 for the user down to 25, whereas the CPU stays at default. Power bar is entirely personal preference. I find it most comfortable at 60. And then first touch control error, we are back on 5 for the user, 99 for the CPU. I won't go into great detail about these values today. I've talked at length in numerous videos about these values now. One thing I will say though is that I've described these values in the past as like an additional difficulty modifier. Give the user an advantage, as we've done here. You can make the game slightly easier. Give the CPU an advantage, and you can make the game slightly more difficult. And increasingly, to me, it feels like the closer you are to 50-50, the further you are from having a realistic and adequately challenging set of sliders. And that might sound bizarre, but basically what I mean by that is I want to make the game through the other slider values just a little bit too challenging, make it a little bit too difficult. I can't win. And then use these values to bring that challenge back just ever so slightly. And then we've got the perfect challenge. Because this is just a subtle difficulty modifier. You're not going to see huge swings. If you reverse these values and go 99 for the user, 5 for the CPU, it's not going to be like jumping a whole difficulty level. It's a slight, subtle difficulty modifier. So make the game slightly too challenging. 5 and 99 in terms of these values will bring it back to just the right level of difficulty. And as for the CPU sliders, we have made some slight changes here as well. We have tackle aggression up at 75. This is pairing with the referee strictness, which we now have at lenient. Referee strictness at the moment just is a very tricky one. On default, it seems to be all over the place. Strict is too strict. So I have it on lenient. We'll see a number of aggressive tackles with this value at 75. But with that strictness set at lenient, you shouldn't see too many red cards on a game-to-game basis. Build-up speed, we have actually lowered to 45. So as I usually say in videos, this value very much pairs with the run frequency value for the CPU, which is up at 99. There are a few too many games where I was dominating possession, but the CPU team had far more shots than I did. And that's because they're not enjoying their possession enough. They're rushing forward, getting a shot away incredibly quickly, whereas I'm trying to build through the lines. So by dropping that build-up speed back just a little bit, the CPU is going to take some time to build through the lines themselves. That 99 round frequency is going to give them plenty of options to move the ball forward when they have the incentive to do so. Shot frequency has also been raised. This is now at 65. Again, if you've watched my Borussia Dortmund career mode series, you will have seen plenty of times when the CPU had a good opportunity to score and they passed it or crossed it or tried to dribble. This was one of the main things that was causing me so much frustration and why I just felt like at times I couldn't concede, I couldn't lose, because the CPU were just unwilling to take on shots that they really should have been taking on. So we've raised shot frequency to 65. First touch pass remains at 55. Crossing remains at 65, but dribble has also been increased to 55. Skill move frequency remains at the default of 50. So here is the full slider set in its entirety, but as usual, I will post it in the description below. And the same goes for the CPU sliders. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there would be a harder set for people who need a bit more of a challenge. Here is the harder set in its entirety. The CPU slider values will be the same. And once more, all of these values will be in the description. The same goes for the assisted set. Use this set if you want to play 10-minute halves, but you don't want to play with full manual controls and you want to play with the assists on instead. You can use the shorter half set if you don't want to play with 10-minute halves. You prefer something in the 4, 5, 6-minute range. For that set, you will need a slightly different set of CPU sliders. And for those of you who want to play 4 to 6-minute halves with the assists on, this is the set for you. So there you have it, version 7 of my realistic slider set. Hopefully this one is good for a little longer than the last one was. If you haven't checked out my realistic Borussia Dortmund career mode series, make sure you do that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with all of my future realistic slider set updates. And you can even consider becoming a 12th man member of the channel to get all new videos 2 days early. But that'll do it for this one. I hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy.